In every empire's shadow, there is a man who refuses to kneel. In the 4th century after Christ, when the eagle of Rome still ruled the known world, there arose in the frozen north a man whose name would strike fear into the hearts of legions, a king not of marble palaces, but of fire, iron, and ancient gods, a man history remembers only in whispers, Vercingetorix of the Gauls, Arminius of Germania, or perhaps, most defiant of all, Vaidila, the pagan king, whose faith stood against the empire that sought to erase it. Rome, mighty and relentless, believed the world was its inheritance. Its legions marched like thunder, its banners cast long shadows across Europe, from the misty forests of Germania to the cold shores of the Baltic. And in those distant lands, where sacred groves replaced marble temples, Rome found resistance not in numbers, but in spirit. It began with conquest, the empire's endless hunger. They called their mission civilization. But to the tribes of the north and east, it was something else entirely, the death of their gods. In the heart of what is now Lithuania, amid dense pine forests and rivers red with iron, the old ways still ruled. There, the fire of Perknaz, the thunder god, burned in wooden temples untouched by Rome. And at the head of these proud pagan people stood King Vaidila, son of the storm, chosen by his gods, not by emperors. Rome sent envoys, bearing gold and crosses. Vaidila sent them back, bearing scars. He was not a man of diplomacy, he was the embodiment of defiance. To him, the Roman faith was not salvation. It was betrayal of the earth, the ancestors, and the sacred flame. So Rome sent more than priests, it sent legions. Under banners of the eagle, thousands marched to crush the last light of the old faith. The clash came at dawn, iron against iron, torch against thunder. Vaidila's warriors, painted in ash and blood, waited in the forests. When Rome's lines broke the tree line, the forest itself came alive. Spears rained down from the canopy. Flames spread through the leaves. The legionnaires, trained for open ground, found themselves trapped, their formation shattered by ghosts in the fog. By nightfall, the Roman standard was burning. Vaidila had won not through strength, but through faith. The belief that no empire could conquer the gods of the forest. But victory has a price. Rome does not forget humiliation. And as the empire turned its gaze north once more, it no longer came with priests and envoys. It came with fire. When the second invasion began, it was not an army, it was a purge. Villages burned. Sacred groves were cut down. Temples of oak and stone fell beneath the weight of Roman vengeance. Yet even as his kingdom turned to ash, Vaidila would not kneel. Captured, chained, and brought before the Roman governor, he stood tall, his eyes burning brighter than the torches around him. They offered him mercy, the cross for his freedom. He spat upon it. In his final breath, he spoke words that haunted Rome for generations. "You may burn my body, but not my gods. For when your empire turns to dust, the thunder will still roar over these lands." And so it was. Vaidila, the pagan king, was executed, his ashes scattered across the river he once swore to protect. But legends say that when storms rolled over the forests of the north, thunder would echo like a heartbeat, a reminder that Rome's victory was never complete, because faith cannot be conquered by the sword. They say that when a man dies, his story ends. But when a legend dies, his story begins to breathe. The death of King Vaidila was not the end of pagan defiance. It was the spark that set centuries of resistance aflame. Rome had taken his body, but not his belief. From the ashes of his pyre rose a spirit that would outlive empires, the faith of those who would rather die with their gods than live under another's. In the decades that followed, the world changed. The old empire fractured, its eagles rusting in forgotten fields. But where Rome fell, its shadow remained, carried now by the cross, not the legion. The church rose to claim what the sword could not. The missionaries came, robed in white, armed with scripture, and a new kind of power. They called it salvation. But in the forests of the north, Salvation looked a lot like conquest. The people of the Baltic lands, Prussians, Lithuanians, Samogitians, had seen what came with the word of Rome. Gold for the willing, fire for the rest. And they remembered Vaidila's stand. By the dawn of the 13th century, the struggle between the old gods and the new faith had become a holy war, not declared by Rome's emperors, but by its popes. The Northern Crusades had begun, and leading the charge were men who claimed to serve God, but carried the same steel as Caesar. They called themselves the Teutonic Knights. Clad in white with black crosses, they descended upon pagan lands like a divine storm. To the church, they were heroes, cleansing the darkness. To the people, they were butchers, burning the sacred groves, drowning idols in rivers, cutting down those who prayed to thunder instead of Christ. But deep in the forests of Lithuania, resistance endured. It was said that the descendants of Vaidila had not forgotten his oath. They swore again, never to kneel before a foreign god. Out of that oath rose a new leader, King Mindaugas, the last crowned pagan monarch of Europe. Cunning, fierce, and unyielding, he ruled not with blind faith but with strategy. He understood the world had changed, that Rome's reach was not just through soldiers but through souls. Mindaugas played a dangerous game. He accepted baptism, in name only, to buy peace with the Crusaders. But while Rome celebrated another convert, the old fire still burned in his heart. Behind his walls, in secret, the ancient rituals continued. The priests came to bless his crown, but the thunder still answered to Perknaz. Rome had won the surface, but underground, in whispers and hidden groves, the old gods were waiting, and then came betrayal. As power shifted and enemies circled, Mindaugas was murdered, not by Romans, but by his own kin. His blood soaked the soil that had once been sacred, and with it, the last crown of a pagan Europe fell. But still, the defiance refused to die. In the centuries that followed, every time a storm broke over the forests, the people remembered. The lightning was Vaidila's wrath, the thunder was Mindaugas' heartbeat, and the rain that fell on the broken temples was not sorrow, it was survival. Even as Rome's banners turned into crosses, and crosses turned into nations, the spirit of the pagan king lived on. A ghost in every tree, every storm, every whisper of wind over the northern plains. Because in the end, no empire lasts forever. But belief shaped in fire, blood, and thunder, endures long after the conquerors are gone. Empires fade, faiths transform. But the echoes of rebellion never die. Centuries after King Vaidila's ashes were scattered to the wind, his defiance still haunted the lands that Rome had once claimed. And though the cross had triumphed outwardly, the roots of the old gods ran deeper than anyone dared to admit. In the forests of Lithuania and Prussia, Christianity came not as faith, but as rule. Bishops became governors. Church bells replaced thunder. And yet, every time the storm broke, the people still whispered the ancient names Perknaz, Amemina, Lema, gods of thunder, earth, and fate. They whispered them in fear and in pride, because deep inside they knew their ancestors had once faced the mightiest empire on earth and never bowed. Even the church could not erase the memory. Priests recorded tales of forest demons and heathen rites, but those demons were memories of people who refused to kneel. Over generations, the church realized it could not destroy paganism, so it absorbed it. The sacred groves became churches. The festivals of fertility became Easter. The fires of summer became St. John's Eve, and slowly, Rome's faith began to wear the mask of the very gods it had conquered. But what was lost in ritual was preserved in spirit. For every convert, there remained a whisper of the old truth. That faith was not born in stone cathedrals, but in the wind, the storm, and the heart of a people unbroken. Centuries later, when new empires rose, the crusading orders, the Teutonic Knights, even the Catholic kings of Poland, they too found that the spirit of the North could not be chained. The Lithuanians remained the last pagan nation in Europe, defying conversion for over 200 years after all others had fallen. And when at last they accepted Christianity in the late 14th century, they did so not by force, but by choice. A choice that carried both defiance and cunning. For in truth, the old gods never truly died, they simply changed their names. The thunder god became Saint Elijah. The earth mother became Mary. The pagan spirit of the land, the power to resist, was reborn as the identity of a nation that refused to vanish. This was Vaidila's legacy. Not the ashes of rebellion, but the spark that kept a people alive when the rest of Europe forgot its roots. When the Crusaders fell, when Rome fractured, when kings turned to dust and cathedrals to ruins, the forests still stood, silent witnesses to the empire's arrogance and the pagan king's faith. And somewhere, in the storm above those woods, you can still hear it, the voice of the man who defied the world's greatest power. You may burn my body, but not my gods, for when your empire turns to dust, the thunder will still roar over these lands. And so it does. The pagan king is gone, but his defiance lives forever, in every storm, in every whisper of wind, in every soul that refuses to kneel. The story of the pagan king is not just history. It's a reminder that faith, courage, and identity can outlast empires. Rome's legions have vanished, its emperors forgotten. But the spirit of those who refuse to kneel still roars in the thunder. If you believe history is more than names and dates, if you seek the untold, the forbidden, the forgotten, then join us and uncover the truth buried beneath the ashes of time. This is Unsolved History, where every empire leaves a shadow and every shadow hides a story. Subscribe now, and remember, those who forget the past surrender their future.